day, Robeson, a noted social activist, was the best-known African-American entertainer in the world. His life was a model of courage, integrity, discipline, and the service of peace.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Leroy Robeson was also a great American.
Yes, he was.
Today, we'll hear some about the mental side of Paul Robeson from Anthony Brown, an international promoter of peace and founder of the Piecing It Together Foundation, an organization that serves the global community as a resource for peace and social justice. He too was a great American. Anthony, better known as Tony Brown, was a student at Estes College, received his bachelor's degree from Goshen College in Goshen, Indiana, and a master's degree from the University of Pennsylvania. He was later on faculty at Goshen and Estes College and University of Washington. At Washington, he was assistant in the counseling center, taught social work, and at Destin, he was artist in residence. Tony Brown is a classically trained singer, distinguished American baritone, international promoter of peace, and citizen of the world. Critics have lauded him for his moving performances of opera, oratorio, Broadway show tunes, art song, folk tunes, and spirituals. It has been said that Tony takes his listeners into the world of music he sings. The legendary folk singer Pete Seeger made 3 video appearances with Tony discussing the friendship of Robeson and the music they cared about. Tony uses slides, music, and the spoken word to bring people together across the divide of race, culture, and religion. His travels and program have taken him to countries like Bosnia, Moldova, Northern Ireland, Uganda, Ethiopia, the Philippines, China, Japan, South Korea, and Colombia, where he has seen music transform and heal. Although retired, he continues to work tirelessly for global peace and social justice. Tomorrow night, he, accompanied by Phillip De Luna, will present his multi-media.
We're gonna both bow. We're gonna both go there and bow, both of us, together. And then we'll get started.
I Go On Singing premiered to glowing reviews in Princeton, New Jersey in 2011, and Wichita, Kansas at the Orpheum Theater in February 2012. Performances in 2014 included Denver, San Francisco, as well as campus audiences at Eastern Mennonite University, Goshen College, as well as the Annenberg Theater at the University of Pennsylvania. Accompanied by pianist, photo projections, and a narrator, I Go On Singing is equal parts historical documentary and concert experiences. But this afternoon, we will be treated to a sneak preview of Paul Robeson and I Go On Singing, as seen through the eyes of Anthony Brown. It is my pleasure to bring to you Tony.
We're going to both bow. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tom.
Without a song, the day would never end. Without a song, the road would never bend. When things go wrong, a man ain't got a friend. Without a song, that field of corn would never see a plow. That field of corn would be deserted now. a man is born, but he's no good no how without a song. I got my trouble and woe, but sure as I know the Jordan will roll, I'll get along as long as a song is strong in my soul. I'll never know what makes the rain to fall. I'll never know what makes the grass so tall. I only know there ain't no love at all without a song.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a delight for Phillip and I to be here in Illini territory. It's my first chance to be in this part of the world, and I'm delighted to bring the story, the incredible story of the life and times of Paul Robeson and the impact that he left on us and how he impacted the world. I want to thank Tom Moore, who had a lot to do with my coming here and hooking us up to the YMCA, and also to Andrea Welty Peachy, who saw the show about a year ago in Goshen, Indiana, and came back and worked to bring it here to Champaign-Urbana. I'm just going to say a couple brief things about the show. I had never imagined that I would do a show on the life and times of Paul Robeson, although I did. I was very aware of him, and I had read lots of his writings and others who wrote about him, but I never conceived of a show. I conceived of a concert singing his songs. And I was interested in doing a show, actually a concert, with two other people, Michael Martin Murphey, who is a 1970s cowboy country western singer. He was big in the charts in the 70s, and with a noted Native American whose name was Robert Mirabal, and he lives in Taos and was a Pueblo Indian. And I had made contact with Michael Martin Murphy. Michael Martin Murphy said I would be delighted to do that, and I was delighted that he said yes. And then I took a train trip out to Taos, where I met Robert Mirabal. And I was picked up at the train station by a man who I found out, Andrew Flack, who was a playwright. And in my being there over a course of 3 days, I got a chance to know both Robert and Andrew Flack. Andrew Flack asked me a question, which was, what would you really like to do? Other than what this project is, what else would you really like to do? And I said, I'd like to do a concert or some kind of show, maybe on the life of Paul Robeson. And then that was it. He just let it go. And we went on through the week. Robert Mirabal wasn't too excited about the project that I was interested in and that Michael Martin Murphy wanted to do with me, but out of that comes the gift of Andrew Flack, because Andrew Flack was a playwright too. And over the preceding, the weeks that passed after I was there, we talked on the phone and he really wanted to write this show, and so we did. He did, and in the course of time as it went along, I had to get involved in some of the writing of it too. And so something that I thought I would never do happened. It just happened to me, and I'm now doing the show around the country, and I have done it in some other places in the world. Paul Robeson is a wonderful, wonderful man. He was a wonderful, wonderful man. And I thought in this show I would want to tell his story, and I would want to let folks know the wide range of talent and gift that he had. But even more importantly than all of that, I wanted folks who, once they were exposed to him, would jump on the bandwagon for promoting peace and justice wherever they found themselves. Because it seems to me that nothing will change in this world of ours unless we engage and get involved. And the courageous life of Paul Robeson is a wonderful example of involvement. His accomplishments cover a wide range of categories, making him a most unusual and exceptional person. What makes him even more exceptional, in my eyes, is that he was able to make tremendous personal and cultural strides within the context of Jim Crow. And you'll see how that all played itself out. He was doing this when racism was legal. Paul Robeson's life begins in 1898 in Princeton, New Jersey. He was the son of Maria and William Robeson, and the youngest of 5 children. Paul's father, William, was born in Martin County, North Carolina. He was enslaved there, and he and his brother Ezekiel escaped, and they came north on the Underground Railroad when William Robeson was only 16 years old. They had the courage to return to the South to visit their family and escape a second time on the Underground Railroad. Both of them, both William and Ezekiel, fought in the Union Army, and after the war, William stayed in the North, and Ezekiel, his brother, returned to the South to be with his parents and his extended family. William Robeson would study theology at the Divinity School in Lincoln University. He was quite a bright person. I'd say he had a tremendous resilience about him. He earned a master's degree in theology in 1876. Paul Robeson would have that same kind of resilience. And he became the pastor of the Witherspoon Presbyterian Church in Princeton. And he eventually married a woman by the name of Maria Louisa Bastille, who came from a very prominent family in Philadelphia. Her people came from African and English and Quaker roots, and they could trace their family roots back to 1608. I should also note that Paul had siblings. He was the youngest of 5, although they had 7. 2 were miscarriages. And the oldest son, his name was, the namesake, William Drew Robeson, but they called him Drew. He became a physician. His next brother was Reeve Robeson, who became a businessman, lived in Detroit. His sister, Marion, was a school teacher. So they all were educated people and did very important things. None of them, however, rose to the kind of stature of the youngest child, Paul Robeson. Paul was 2 years old when his brother William Drew, they called him, tried to enroll at Princeton University. Unfortunately, he didn't get in, he didn't get accepted at Princeton, and it hit a nerve in his father, William. It hit a big nerve because he had all of the credentials, the achievements, the GPA. He had everything that he needed, but it hit a nerve, and he went. William, the father, went to the president of Princeton University, who happened to be Woodrow Wilson, who would later become president of the United States. And William confronted Woodrow Wilson. I mean, he gave it to him. And Woodrow told him, point blank, we don't accept colored people. The upshot of that was that Woodrow Wilson had him kicked out of the Witherspoon Presbyterian Church where he was pastoring. Before the Witherspoon Church was built, African Americans were meeting at the same time that the white church was meeting, because they met in the white church, but they all sat in the back of the church. They wanted their own church, so the mother church built them one, and essentially they ran the church, even though that's where the black folks worshiped. The white folks really ran the church. So Woodrow knew who to talk to have William Robeson thrown out of the church, and that's what happened. William would struggle big time economically. He bought a horse and started hauling ashes as a way to try to make a living. They did get a lot of help from their relatives down in North Carolina, because they sent them all kinds of food. Drew went to Lincoln University, the school where his father graduated, a historically black college, and he did his education there and then went on to med school. Paul, in his autobiography, Here I Stand, speaks of his father and how he handled those very difficult times when they were struggling to make ends meet. He says, he was still the dignified, reverent Robeson to the community, and no man carried himself with greater pride. Not once did I hear him complain of poverty and misfortune of those years. Serene and undaunted, he struggled to earn a livelihood and see to our education. When Drew would come home, his brother, when he'd come home from college, he would always work with Paul, teaching him, because Drew was playing football at college. And he would always work with Paul, how to run the football, how to tackle, how to block. Paul refers to his brother as his first coach as it relates to the fundamentals of football. The family would never be the same, though, after Maria Louisa, Paul's mother, was trying to take the rug out from under the wood-burning stove, and her son was helping her, and the ashes came out of the stove as they tilted it, because the door opened, and some of the flames jumped up onto her, and at first she didn't realize it, and by the time she realized it, she was caught up in the flames. She inhaled the smoke and the flames, and it cost her life. She lingered for a day or two, and then she left us. William Robeson would never marry again. He did return to the pastorate and moved with Paul. who was now the only child, to Westfield, New Jersey. And he said at that time he was through with the Presbyterians. He had had his share of difficulties with the Presbyterians, so he joined the AME Church, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and was pastor there. The African American Episcopal Church has had a long tradition of being engaged in social concerns and human rights. The years there that they lived there were very good ones for Paul's athletic and his educational development. At 12 years old, in junior high school, he played high school sports. He was the regular shortstop on the baseball team. In the 7th grade, he was tall, he was fast, he was agile, and Paul's father expected nothing but perfection from his son, and for the most part, that's what he got. He pushed him at every turn. Paul was the best student in that school, but he got a B on his report card. And that is where his father kicked in and put the emphasis on perfection, I guess we could say. He would tell his father, look, my teachers are happy with my grades, but that had no impact on his father. If there was a B there, that's the course that needed to be focused on even more. So he would work with Paul on that subject where he had earned that B, and eventually Paul began earning nothing but A's. The lesson was always shoot for perfection. He lived to earn his father's praise, and he was so happy when he pleased him. Living up to your potential was a very important lesson for Paul Robeson. Another thing he learned from his father was that people should be respected. While we are different, we are mostly alike. Another idea he would stress is climb up if you can, but always show that you are grateful. And above all, do nothing to give them cause to fear you. Well, he didn't make good on that one, because so many people were afraid of Paul Robeson when he was in the sweet part of his life. He was a mature, middle-aged man, and he put the fear of God in a lot of people. The imprint he left on his son was huge. Paul would later write in his autobiography, "The glory of my childhood years was my father. I loved Pop like no one in all the world." Somerville, New Jersey was their next stop, where Robeson pastored another AME church. And it was in the 8th grade at his graduation that he gave a speech which included Patrick Henry's statement, "Give me liberty or give me death." He attends a school there in Somerville where the student body was 200 students, and only 12 of them were African American. The principal was not very happy when Paul made the glee club, and even more unhappy when he was given solos. The music teacher took him aside, started working with the voice. There were also some teachers who took interest in him and noticed his exceptional academic ability. And in church, he would be asked to sing solos. He was also very often reticent to go to any social events, especially things like dances, because he knew that he couldn't dance with anyone, and he didn't feel a part of it all, so he withdrew from those kinds of events. But there were rare occasions when he did go, and a couple of the school teachers, some of the couple's school teachers would dance with him. His father would always remain involved with his academic life. His oldest brother, Drew, would always have intellectual conversations with him when he came home. By his senior year, he was 190 pounds and 6'2". He was both a full back and a defensive lineman. In baseball, he was the center fielder, and in basketball, he was a guard. He was so strong in football that the state of New Jersey had to change the rules to contain him. He assumed that he would follow his father and his brother and go to Lincoln University because he really wanted to rid himself of racial prejudice in college. His father, however, had another idea. He wanted him because Drew, the oldest son, wasn't able to get into Princeton. He wanted one of his children to enter a more prestigious college. Paul heard about a competitive exam for all New Jersey high school students in his senior year. The prize, if he won, was a 4-year full-ride scholarship to Rutgers College. What he learned was that the principal at the high school deliberately never told him and his dad about this opportunity. And so he was coming at this at a real disadvantage. The others were told about this and had a chance to prepare and even to take some exams, some freshman exams, some sophomore exams, and some junior exams in preparation. And Robeson had to play catch up. The exam would have to cover all 4 years, and while the other students had already taken the other 3, he had to do it all. But Paul's father was so determined. He said, we're going to tackle this. We're going to make this happen. We're going to work hard. And so they worked hard. And suffice it to say, he won the scholarship to Rutgers. Sadly, his father died before he entered Rutgers, but at least his father knew that his wish for his son to enter into a more prestigious college would, in fact, come to pass. Paul, I'll just put it this way, it wasn't particularly easy for Paul at Rutgers. The coach had already learned about Paul Robeson. The football coach had already learned about Paul Robeson and his athletic prowess, especially his football athleticism. So he had talked to him about making the football team. Paul writes about the first encounter with the football team when they scrimmaged. He says, the white boys did not want a Negro on the team. At the scrimmage, one boy slugged me in the face and smashed my nose. And then when I was down flat, another boy got me with his knee. He managed to dislocate my shoulder. He picked up the boy and he lifted him up and he said, I'm going to kill you. The coach comes over and says, put him down, put him down. He made the team. He made the team. Thank goodness the coach intervened. The thing was, Paul was such an exemplary football player that the coach wasn't going to let anything keep him from playing. He would go on to excel in all sports, receiving letters in football, track, and field basketball, baseball. It wasn't easy for him in so many levels. He experienced the full throttle of racism. He could not live on campus. He lived with an African-American family that was off the campus. Students glared at him with contempt when he was walking around there. He sat alone in the cafeteria. Only his English professor would reach out to Paul during his first few weeks of school. He was a boy of steel, because generally speaking, he took it all in stride. And even though it was profoundly painful and hurtful, he took it all in stride and understood the times that he was living in, and did the best he could. He would eventually be named an All-American and the #1 football player in the country. He sang in the glee club, but was not allowed to travel off campus with the group. In his junior year, he was elected to Phi Beta Kappa. But when his teammates elected their senior captain, his name was never mentioned. Paul Robeson will go on to become the valedictorian of his graduating class at Rutgers. His father would not live to see him graduate. More than that, he got his wish. He got his wish that one of his children would go to a place like Rutgers. After Rutgers, he went to Columbia University. He was doing two things. He was studying at Columbia University, but he also had a deep artistic sense, and he loved music, and he loved drama. And so he was doing that. He was auditioning for plays. He would later become quite the Shakespearean speaker. And at some of his concerts, he would deliver lines from Shakespearean plays. He played football on the side, and while he was there, he met the lady that he would ultimately marry, Eslanda Cordova Good. She was planning to go on to med school, but when things heated up between them, that took a back seat. She was a huge support for Paul Robeson and really did assist him on many levels in helping to elevate, give visibility to his artistic skills. He was making his rounds in the theater and was making lots of connections and meeting a lot of people. People like the great intellectual W.E.B. Du Bois, James Weldon Johnson, Harry T. Burleigh. When he graduated from Rutgers, he got, from Columbia, he got a, when he graduated, he got a job and in a law firm, and his coach helped him get that. And early on in that, maybe the first week, he calls in the secretary to do dictation for him. She immediately responds, "I don't do dictation for the N-word." And he immediately, without saying anything, got up from the desk where he was seated, and he walked out of that law firm, and he never returned, and he left the profession of law and put much more of his time into the arts. He got an invitation to star in a play in London. And this really was the beginnings of an international career. He played in a show called Voodoo, and it was the beginning of his relationship with Britain. He and Islanda would eventually move there and live there for quite a long time, many years. It was during his years in London that he began to involve himself with the anti-colonial movement and met many students from Africa. Now we see Paul shifting into something that has to do with social causes that were important to him. He studied African history and culture. It would forever change him and his views of himself. As he says in his book, his autobiography, Here I Stand, as an artist, it was natural that my interest in Africa was cultural. Culture? The foreign rulers of the continent insisted that there was no culture in Africa. I plunged with excited interest into my studies. I came to see that African culture was indeed a treasure store for the world. I felt as one with my African friends and became filled with a glowing sense of pride in these new riches. I learned that along with the towering achievements of Greece and China, there stood the continent of Africa, full of wisdom and majesty, yet unseen and denied. As for myself, I belong to Africa. If I am not there in body, I am there in spirit. Also, while in London, he looks out of his window and he sees the Welsh coal miners marching down a major street in the city, protesting because of their poor working conditions. He runs out, he begins to march with them. His relationship with the Welsh coal miners would last for the rest of his life, and he would ultimately make a film up there in Wales about their plight called The Big Valley. His interest in the plight of the common people was growing. Common people from all around the world. I should also add that his propensity for languages, his ability to speak languages was amazing. He spoke 22 languages fluently. As Paul's star rose, there was simultaneously social change going on in Europe, on the European continent. Fascism was on the rise in Italy and Spain. Hitler was coming into power. He began to see the emergence of the Soviet Union as hopeful, as he was impressed that in one generation, the serfs had risen as equals. This was not something he could claim about the people in the United States and about the African Americans in the United States. And he was not holding back his words. At the request of a playwright in Russia, he was invited to Russia and states that for the first time in his life while there, he felt like a full human being. This would be the beginning of many trips to Russia. And his son, Paul Robeson Jr., would go to school there. He too was fluent in Russian. The people loved his singing, and his attempts to speak Russian at that time were very much appreciated, and to sing in Russian. He understood that a huge difference was made when you could speak the words of the people in the country that you were in. And it did make a profound difference. The Soviets loved him. Everywhere he went, he was lauded for his fine voice and his wonderful message, focusing on the oneness of the human family. By now, he was the most famous African American in the world. In 1940, he and his wife Essie returned to the United States, and he continued his work for the common people in the United States. As he told the press, "I won't be singing for the next couple of years except for the rights of my people in the United States. No pretty songs, gentlemen. Time for some full citizenship." He connected to many progressive organizations and helped to raise money for their causes. And by now, he was, as I said, the most famous African American in the world. He wasn't afraid. He was really a fearless man at a time when you could get in real trouble for speaking out as an African American man. But he was fearless. He met with Harry Truman and encouraged him to take action against lynchings in the United States. He marched with American workers for better working conditions. He was invited to Paris by W.E.B. Du Bois, the great African American scholar. He was invited to Paris to attend an international peace conference of young people from all over the world. And while he was there, he made a statement that caused many in the States to question his patriotism. He said, "It is unthinkable that American Negroes would go to war on behalf of those who have oppressed us for generations against the Soviet Union, which in one generation has raised our people to full human dignity." He was misquoted in the American press as saying, "Negroes should not defend their country." Those words were labeled as treason, and they were words he never spoke. Eventually, he lost the right to his passport. It was revoked, and for 8 years he would live in the United States, unable to leave and to connect to all of the folks that he had come to know in other parts of the world. They loved him, and the letters came flowing into the White House, trying to get the government to give him his passport back. He was blacklisted in this country. The entertainment community turned their back on him completely. He wasn't working. So these were difficult times. He was isolated. And he was isolated from his own community in terms of the African American community. The leaders didn't want to get too close for fear of what might happen to them. The Un-American Activities Committee, headed by Joseph McCarthy, called him in and said to him, "If you don't like the United States, why don't you leave it?" Well, so he says, "Well, because my father was a slave and my people died to build this country. I'm going to stay right here and have a part of it just like you." and no fascist-minded people are going to drive me from it. Is that clear? Once again, fearless. They were, however, difficult days for Paul, but he was loved all around the world by millions of people and by many here in the United States. He never embraced the idea put on him by McCarthy that he was a communist, although I think it's safe to say that he how could we say this? He was a supporter of equality and equal rights. And it appeared to him that in Russia, there was more of that happening over there than what was happening over here. He had many friends that were communist, but he never said that he was one. What he was a committed international citizen who fought for human rights for his people and other oppressed people around the world. He was able to get his passport back, and his first stop was Carnegie Hall, where he sang to a standing room only crowd. People loved him in the United States. From there, he would travel to Russia. And of course, he was met with throngs of people there. He was going to be there for a little while, and then from there, he was going to go to Cuba. Something happened to him in Russia. Something happened to him in Russia that was really most unfortunate. He was in his hotel suite the night before it was time for him to leave. And there were all kinds of people in his suite, and people that he didn't even know. And he began to convulse. And he essentially became quite ill, couldn't go the next day to Cuba because physically he wasn't able to. When I was working on the show that I do, I Go On Singing, Paul Robeson's Life in Word and Song, Pete Seeger said to me, "Are you going to put that part in there about what happened to him when he was in Russia?" I said, "Well, I know about that, but I don't know whether I'll put that in or not." He said, "Well, you talk to his son, because his son was there too, and he got sick too, but that's not as bad as Paul." What happened is that someone put a hallucinogen in his drink, and Paul Robeson was never the same. He immediately went to London, where he received shock therapy, an extended period of shock therapy. He really was not the man that he was, and he never performed again, and he went back to the United States. By then, his wife Islanda had died, so he moved into Philadelphia with his sister Marion. And he died. He lived there for 10 years, and he died as a very old man. As somebody said to me, "They got him, didn't they?" Well, I think they did. Shortly, Harry Belafonte, shortly before, and Harry Belafonte, by the way, Robeson mentored Harry Belafonte. He mentored many, but Harry Belafonte was a protege of Paul Robeson. So Harry Belafonte visits him in Philadelphia, and he was living at his sister's, and as I said, and he said, Belafonte says, and I looked at this giant of a man who was quiet, he was frail in body, but still strong in spirit. And through all that, even through all that had engulfed him, McCarthyism, the difficult times that he faced in this country because of his beliefs, because of his resistance to oppression, I looked at him and I said, Paul, I must know, was all that you have gone through really worth it, considering the platform you had gained and how easy life could have been for you? Was it worth it? And he said, Harry, make no mistake. There is no aspect of what I have done that wasn't worth it. Although we may not have achieved all the victories we set for ourselves, may not have achieved all the victories and all the goals we set for ourselves. Beyond victory itself, infinitely more important was the journey. I would like to sing one last song for you. It's a song that Paul Robeson really made popular because of his role in Showboat as Joe. And while in London, he changes the last part of that song. The last part is, I gets weary and sick of trying, I'm tired of living and scared of dying, but Old Man River, he just keeps rolling along. He changed it to, I keeps laughing instead of crying, I must keep fighting until I'm dying. And Old Man River, he just keeps rolling along.
There's an old man called the Mississippi. That's the old man I don't like to be. What does he care if the world's got if the land ain't free? He must know something, but don't say nothing. He just keeps rolling. He keeps on rolling along. He don't plant taters, he don't plant cotton, and them that plants 'em is soon forgotten. But Old Man River, he just keeps rolling along. You and me, we sweat and strain, body all aching and racked with pain. Tote that barge, lift that bale, get a little drunk, and your land's in jail. But I keeps laughing instead of crying. I must keep fighting until I'm dying. And Old Man River, he'll just